What is up, Eternal Team? Team Eternal, welcome to another EPL Eternal Logos podcast. Back at you live in studio. No, just like I promised. We're back. It's been a couple of months since I've been with you guys. Obviously, always happy and excited to be back. Today is August 27th. It's been a couple months. It's been a little busy, as always, but I'm happy to be back with you guys. Last time you guys saw us, we were in studio with our friend Jenna from the A. She is doing well. If you haven't followed her, make sure you go give her a follow. And we were talking about relationships. In that episode, we did talk about, I did bring up that we would do an episode on investing or an investing mindset. And so that is what today's topic is going to be about. As always, liking and subscriptions are optional and commenting is mandatory. Come on in with your thoughts, opinions, and ideas. We want to talk about them. Hopefully today's episode and topic will get the juices flowing for everybody so we can talk a little bit and discuss a little bit about exactly what this means for you. And then maybe we can get some more fruitful results in our lives. So again, I'm sorry for being so late with this episode, but I think investing is such an important topic to discuss because it really helps people to understand how to obtain the things in their life that they actually have value in, right? I think in investing, I'm calling it investing mindset because I don't want people to think just investments in terms of finances. It goes far beyond just finances. Obviously, finances is a way that people can, that you can make advancements in your life when it comes to the money department, but we're not talking about that specifically. We'll touch on probably exactly what that is, and maybe in an episode later we can do an episode on investment, financial investment, and talk a little bit more about stocks, mutual funds, portfolios, and all of those kinds of things, because that is something that I do in my life and I do take serious. I think it's fun, but again, we're entitling this episode The Investment Mindset because it goes beyond finances. It's really a thing of discipline, practice, understanding value, how to properly place value. And that is something that you can apply in all aspects of your life, not just in your financial world, or in any other thing that you do. When people say invest in yourself, it's like, hey, go get your education, go, do the necessarily healing that you need to do. What are your hobbies? Go invest in your skills, go build yourself, go do this or that. And so we just kind of want to talk through a little bit of that. And that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. So a couple housekeeping things. We do have, hopefully my friend Marissa is going to be able to come on within the next week or so. Marissa, if you're listening to this, hopefully we can get you on next week. But we're going to be talking about, I don't know, actually, she asked me what the topic was going to be. And I said, well, you get to decide as the guest, because that's kind of what we're going to be trying on the platform. So hopefully she'll come up and have a good topic that we can discuss, and it'll be free form. You got to get to see the thoughts spontaneously coming out. You'll get to see how we process logically and do all of the stuff that we've been talking about we want to do on the podcast. So it'll get more and more exciting. Hopefully I'll be able to get more guests, maybe 2 or 3 as opposed to just a one-on-one, so we can kind of see what that will be like, discussion in the studio. And it's going to be all good. So hopefully episodes this month, well, I guess there's just one this month, and I guess Marissa's will be next month. But again, we're going to try to do 2 an episode, but please stay tuned. We're picking up. Hopefully you guys are liking the content so far, and we'll bring all that to you guys in the near future. So investing, like I said, it goes beyond finances. It goes beyond trying to simply get some reward as a result of taking some risk, right? It's a discipline. It's being able to understand value and how to properly place value. So I wrote a couple things down just so I wouldn't forget, but basically the investor's mindset basically is to understand the concept of value or seed sowing. For anybody that might be religiously minded, seed sowing is a concept that you'll hear quite often. It's basically taking value as it pertains to investing and understanding how to properly orient value into things of meaning or something that you find meaning in, right? Obviously, one of the most obvious examples of that is self. If you are hoping to become a doctor or a lawyer, or you're hoping to become a content creator, investing in yourself might look like taking the time to understand what it takes to maybe build a studio, understanding the equipment that will be necessary to do it, taking some finances and putting that right. And finances ultimately equates to money. Money ultimately equates to time. And, that's a value that you give. That's a real value thing. So taking some of your money and putting it aside and maybe investing in a microphone or a boom arm or a camera to record yourself. You can also take speech classes, those kinds of things, right? So in principle, what you're looking at is the hobby or some people do content creation occupationally, so you may do it for work. Taking the time, understanding what's necessary and what's required to do it and do it well, and then coming up with a plan to execute, right? And so the investment mindset portion of that will look something like taking the money, taking the time, and not always expecting that you're going to yield something immediately. I think in investing, a lot of people, when you think investing, it's like, oh, you put some money in now and you'll yield something in the future. That time is certainly a factor very oftentimes, but it's not always, might not necessarily always be the case, right? If you're a millionaire, you want to invest in content creation, right? You will have the necessary finances to put your plan into action a little more quickly because you'll be able to afford more equipment quicker, or you'll be able to afford speech classes a little sooner or something like that, right? And so I think very oftentimes having the finances on hand to immediately do something may backfire, right? If you have it readily available to you, you're not necessarily putting in the effort. And I use effort, not necessarily time. Again, time is a factor, but putting in the effort required to stick it out, to see it through and actually yield the results of the seed that you planted, right? Bearing the fruit later. And that's a rewarding thing. And I think everybody in their lives have in some way, shape, or form experienced that. And so it's really understanding value and how to properly orient it to meaningful things or things of meaning or meaning in of itself, or purpose, being purposefully driven in something, right? And so, in other words, you reap what you sow. You got to put something in to get something out, and understanding and having the discipline to do that in such a way that it's going to be fruitful for you. The two ideas that I think are most prevalent for me when you have an investment mindset is discipline and patience. I did mention discipline, but patience with yourself and patience with what you're trying to do. So I think in the last episode when I was talking with Jenna, and I've had this conversation with a number of my friends and family, and I'm sort of developing this idea, this concept when it comes to having an investment mindset or investing in general, is to understand better the risks or costs associated with the thing that you're investing in, or understanding the risks, costs that are associated with the activity. In other words, that is to say that if you're going to invest in something, if you're going to invest in yourself, if you're going to, actually, let's use the example that we talked about with the relationships. Understanding the goal of what you're trying to do when you get a relationship is to have companionship, long-term companionship, we'll say marriage or relationship that may last, 10 plus years, and beyond. Ultimately, you kind of know in a sense that there is going to be something that you're going to have to give up, right? If you're looking to have a relationship, you're going to most likely give up dating other people, right? To date or to be in a relationship with one person. If you're going to be married, that means you're basically saying no to everyone else and yes to the one person, which is the beauty of marriage, by the way. An episode coming soon to talk about marriage and the importance of it, from my perspective at least. And I think objectively so, and we'll make that argument. But understanding the costs associated with a relationship is to understand what sacrifices you'll need to make. Also understanding what it's going to take for you to put into that for it to yield fruitful results and for you to actually obtain and gain and acquire that which you set out in the first place, right? So if you're entering into a relationship, you want to get married, let's say marriage is the goal. You're going to have to endure some things. You may have to do some counseling, may have to do some healing. If you're one of those people who has dated and dates have not been gone in your favor. So you may have to invest financially in dating, when you go on a date, paying for the dates, those kinds of things, right? So you're understanding the costs that are associated with it. I think on the other side of that is to say, if you are to say in your mind, hey, I want a long-term relationship, but you're putting that off, right? And I think, investment mindset is like, again, when you're understanding the costs of things, it starts to put the other activities into perspective. If you're deciding to just go out and date and not build serious relationships or discipline yourself against, dating casually or trying to, have as much fun as you can, or you're not taking things serious, that's going to come at a cost, right? It's going to cost you time. It'll cost you money, as previously mentioned. It will also cost you some heartache, most likely. I think most people who are out there dating, are sort of experiencing traumas or, damage or whatever you want to call it in those experiences. And so those things are costs to your long-term goal, to your commitment, your long-term commitment that you're hoping to make with a person out there, right? And another thing you have to consider also is when you're talking to other people or when you're getting into a relationship with other people, they have needs, wants, and expectations from you as well, right? And so if they're the kind of person who wants to date seriously and get married, they're going to have some requirements for you, right? If they prefer somebody who has not gone on a ton of dates, right? Let's just say you're 30 and you're looking to date and you've dated 15 people. There are some people out there who may have a requirement that say, I'm making this up, obviously. I prefer to date people who haven't dated more than 10 people. So then you wouldn't qualify in a sense to date that person. And again, it's a silly example, but these things are real practically. I think sometimes idealistically we can think, in a perfect world, a perfect scenario, exactly how can these things sort of, work out for me and my benefit. But oftentimes when you put them into practice, you'll be surprised at some people's dating requirements, dating preferences, and those kinds of things. And so as someone who's looking to date long term or get into a committed relationship or ultimately be married, it sort of behooves you in a sense to consider not just what you want and what you're going to personally have to give up, but also what you're requiring someone else to give up, or what you're requiring someone else to essentially subject themselves to when dating you. And so dating is obviously one example of many. You can use a house example. If you want to eventually buy a house, right? Then you starting to save your money, or maybe invest your money. Obviously with investing, it could be a bit of a risk, but saving your money is a good principle when you're trying to save to buy a house, obviously for the down payment. And so if you spend frivolously or you spend your money recklessly, you're not saving. Let's just say you want to buy a house and you have 10 years, and by the age of 30, so between the age of 20 and the age of 30, you say, I want to buy my first house by the time I'm age 30. So when you're 20, let's just say you spend half that time, 5 years, just spending money, not really saving, taking trips, going out all the time, buying tons of coffee, whatever the case is. And you haven't been saving or investing your money properly, or developing in you having the discipline to not do those things. By the time year 5 comes, the pressure kind of is on, right? Because you haven't been doing what's required to build up to where you need it to be. Because theoretically, right, by the time, if 10 years was your goal, if year 5, you should be halfway saved up. If you're doing it super logically or doing it with time as the measure, as one of the measurements of success, right? Then by the time you're 25, like I said, the pressure will be on. And I think that can be dangerous, and I'll talk about why that's dangerous in a second, but hopefully you understand the concept. If you took 5 years to not save your money, that's the cost of buying a house. And so there's this idea in economics called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a really, really, really important concept to understand, because I tell people this all the time. Everything costs. Everything. Doesn't matter what you do, where you're going, who you're with. If you decide to spend $5 on candy, that means you can't spend $5 on a new phone. It means you can't spend $5 on coffee. It means you can't spend $5 investing in a home, right? So when making decisions, it's really important to understand the cost that are associated with them, because it really gives you an idea about what you're giving up. And for me, I think understanding that is far more important than the reward, because if you save for a house for those 10 years, and you save properly every year, and you're using every month to build up, save $500 for 10 years, by the time 10 years, you're going to get the result, because you put in the work, you had the discipline to actually end up at the place that you were going. In 10 years, you have a down payment on your house. And at $500 a month, you would have quite a bit of money to put a down payment on a house. And so understanding or knowing that is simple to me. The work associated really is to consider what is the opportunity cost of not doing this at a steady rate if it were buying a house. What's the opportunity cost of dating this person over that person, or dating these people over just settling for this one person over X amount of time? What's the opportunity cost for not sowing the correct seeds, right? If you are a gardener or you are an agriculturalist, I don't know if agriculturalist is a word, but we're going to use it. If you don't plant this seed at the right time, and I think gardening is a great example, because at certain times of the year is the proper times to plant certain crops. If you don't plant and understand, what it's going to take to harvest that particular crop, if you don't plant at the right time, you won't be able to harvest during the season of harvest, right? And if you don't, shout out to all the people out there who plant food, get vegetables and all those things. So it's because it's a lot of work that goes into that. And that's something I've actually wanted to study before, because it's such a delicate process. And I think a lot can be learned from studying that process. But if you don't plant in the right time, you don't harvest in the right season. And that's dangerous, because if you don't harvest in the right season, you could starve. And so understanding the cost is to really understand the environment. It's to understand what failure looks like. In addition to that, I think it's really important, because what I see happening to people oftentimes in life is they don't understand the risks, the costs, and they sort of, in a sense, waste time. And when you get to a point in your life, if you don't invest your time properly, then if you don't take the time to have patience and discipline and build into yourself the good habits. And I was talking to my brother about this yesterday. Every single day of your life, you're practicing who you are, right? You're practicing the habits of your life that you've gained through experience, through your growing up and the influences that you've been around, etc. The longer you wait to make the necessary changes in your life to yield the results ultimately that I think you may say that you want in your life, right? Again, relationships, everybody wants in some way, shape, or form companionship. I've never really met anybody that didn't want some form of companionship. So if you don't take the time to invest in yourself by taking the necessary actions to gain the right values, principles, learn the right lessons, really dwell on the lessons learned so you can extract the tangible values that are tangible and intangible values that are going to be fruitful in your life later in your life. The longer you wait, the longer, in my opinion, you run the risk, at the very least, you run the risk of building bad habits. And a decade later, you then find yourself having to unlearn things as opposed to just, taking a step, recognizing the mistake and pulling back. You find yourself making so many mistakes that eventually get to a place where you have to sort of invest, or you have to take your resources and apply them to unlearning things, sort of backtracking and then relearning the correct path. I think sometimes, and I mentioned this in the podcast with Jenna as well too, I think sometimes we think that taking a bunch of wrong steps or going out there and experiencing what not to do gets you closer to what you should do. And I don't necessarily think that's true. Again, I'm willing to debate on that with anybody, anytime. But I think oftentimes people think that experience is that. But I think it's better to, like I said, take the time to understand the entire gambit of what you're going to be participating in and where you're ultimately going to be going, right? And so I say, if you don't take the time to focus, and if you don't take the time to understand how to properly place failures, how to measure them, and utilize the lessons learned from those failures, ultimately, accomplishment can become your enemy. And I said I would get back to this a moment ago because I think that, let's go back to the house scenario. 10 years to, you want to buy a house in 10 years. You don't start saving until 5 years in, right? A means you're behind. According to the goal you set for yourself. A means you're behind. B, it means that you probably don't even know where to start, right? You haven't probably invested the time to understand, okay, well, down payment, how much do I need? What's the percentage that I need to put down? What's the interest rate of the houses in 10 years, right? If you don't start saving, $5 today is not going to be the same $5 tomorrow because of inflation. So many different things that you have to consider that you might not think about. But if you had started earlier, you would have started to learn, at the very least, start to learn the important things that you'll need to know when you're getting to buying a house, right? And so you'll be far more prepared at the very least 5 years in. You'll have a little bit of money saved. You'll have some principles under your belt. You'll understand interest rates and how all of those kinds of things work financially and otherwise. They'll be prepared, much, much better prepared. But if you wait, or you don't take the time to spend that 5 years wisely, then you're going to be under pressure. And that pressure is what I'm kind of sort of calling accomplishment becoming your ally. Because what I've seen is if you don't spend that time, eventually you start looking at the goal. You start looking at the thing that you set out to do and you start to resent it. And do I really need a house anyway? It's like houses are overrated. You start doing things like that. You start to get bitter. And then you start to go down a different path. And you start to compromise in ways that you probably wouldn't have needed to compromise before. your money isn't going to go as far because you didn't invest the proper way. So again, inflation. So now, you were going to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. Since you didn't start investing now, you're like, well, I need to buy a house by the time I'm 30. Maybe I can stretch that to 32. So now it's from 10 years to 12 years. You still don't have enough saved. Now the price of houses have gone up. So now when it's time to put a down payment on the house, you don't have enough. And the house and the quality of house also that you're going to be able to afford is going to go down because the price of houses have gone up. And so there's a lot that goes into it, and the problems can escalate. And it could just be really get to a place where you feel like you've made a catastrophic failure, and you'll look back on your life in retrospect and wonder and probably be upset at yourself and be full of regret and all of those things. And so I just think that it's just an important thing to understand that the mindset of an investor is to recognize the importance of the future, recognize the importance of what you have today and what it will be worth tomorrow, and to be able to properly place that and put it in its proper place. Now, I'm not saying you can't go and, have fun and spend your money and enjoy yourself, but understanding the importance of this is crucial to, I think, meaning, ultimately happiness, and also learning what it takes to stick to something and gain a true value in yourself that's ultimately going to be fruitful for your family, for the relationships that you're building, etc. And so this is an idea and a concept that we will return to later with other people, with other guests. I will definitely bring this up probably in conversation on the podcast because I think it's that important. I think it stretches to just so many different categories. It's a part of critical thinking. If you can develop in yourself a good mindset of critical thinking, if you can start to learn how to do that pretty efficiently and effortlessly, having an invested mindset kind of becomes a part of you, kind of becomes a part of how you think on a daily basis. And before you know it, you're able to basically do anything and you'll feel unstoppable, to be perfectly honest. I think it's something that I've tried to do in my life, and I think it is in some way, shape, or form yielding pretty good results for all the things that I've been able to accomplish. And I've been extremely blessed, and I think understanding these principles is most of the reason, or partly why. So thank you guys. Nice, quick, concise one today. Another one coming soon, hopefully in a week. Again, as always, liking and subscriptions, are optional, but commenting is mandatory. So thank you guys. I love you. I appreciate you as always. And we will be back very soon. Enjoy.